next leadership commander, Philip II, was revealed in Rise of Kingdoms just the other day. We saw all of his skills and what he's possibly going to look like when he releases. And today, I'm going to be looking at the idea of a leadership march in Rise of Kingdoms. Could we see another leadership march? Or is that just kind of out of the question? Is that something that we won't really see being meta again? A march where you're really supporting with other commanders. So if you're interested in the idea of a supporting march, if it could be meta again, if Philip II will be able to revive the march, then you want to stick around until the end of the video. Now, let's start off by going over something that's going to be really important, and that is the current state of leadership and support marches in Rise of Kingdoms. And I'll just start off by being quite blunt. At the moment, you're not really supposed to run a support march. Running 7 DPS marches in a 7-march murderable, which is where you're getting to the bare bones, you're pretty much running rubbish commanders. Support marches are still not worth it. They're not actually good because the support march isn't giving off enough stats to really make up for the fact that you're missing a whole march of DPS. And that was the current, and at least is the current problem with supporting marches in Rise of Kingdoms. The fact that even though they are technically giving fairly decent and good stats, the main problem is they're too weak currently to make it justifiable. And that is because when it comes down to supporting marches, Trajan is easily the best commander. There isn't really a supporting commander that is stronger than Trajan, at least currently in the game. And the one thing we should note is he's still decent. I mean, his stats are pretty good. Once you expertise him, he's going to give you a total of 120 rage. You're going to deal 25% more skill damage. So actually, you're going to get 150 rage, you're going to deal 30% more skill damage, but you are going to take 25% more damage. But the amount of stats he was giving, especially at the time of his release, this was a lot. 5 nearby allied troops getting 30% more skill damage is insane, and getting 150 rage pretty much makes him a walking rage engine. So you can get rid of stuff like Naked Rage, you can get rid of the skill tree. It was really, really good at the time of its release, and it allowed you to really ramp up your murderable a lot. But as time went on, Trajan faded into obscurity, especially because of one key factor. His stats are still relatively okay in the current era. I mean, they're usable, not OP, but they are usable. The one thing he really lacked was a good pairing. At the time of release, Ethelflaed was an amazing commander, could be run with Trajan. Nowadays, definitely nowhere near as good enough. Even though they gave her a full design revamp, her skills are just as pretty much mediocre as they used to be. So Ethelflaed definitely not strong enough to run with Trajan. The other pairing was Mehmed. Nowadays, Mehmed's decent, but he's again not strong enough. Then came Honda. Again, it was a decent march, but again, Honda is not strong enough in the current meta. And then the final pairing, really, the one that was like the last main pairing I saw personally, was Mulan. And Mulan she was kind of on the fence. She's a really tanky commander as well. I mean, Mulan definitely trades okay in terms of tankiness. Like, it's hard to kill her, and that's mainly because of her double relic. But as time went on and more stronger commanders came out, we saw higher DPS numbers, a lot of health reductions through commanders like Scipio Africanus, and stuff like commanders moving away from skill damage. We started to see a bit of a fade in the power of Mulan, especially the fact that Leo Chair will just bypass her skill damage reduction, Scipio is reducing health. A lot of commanders can sometimes ignore stats nowadays with their true damage, so Mulan kind of lost a lot of her value there. Trajan also lost a bit of value in the fact that, especially nowadays with true damage, they're going to ignore defense, and he has up to 60% defense, and you'll get that in about 1 skill cycle. So Trajan, again, same situation, started to fade a little bit and didn't have any really good pairing to bring him back up to standard. That is like the current position of leadership. You don't run a leadership march in terms of a supporting march, and the key reason is because there are no good pairings. If we saw a better pairing, there's a very good chance we could see Trajan come back into the meta. Now that brings me to the future of a possible supporting march. Could we see a march that is actually able to be a supporting march and actually serve that supporting role? And the first thing I would say is that there is a slight possibility. I'll again be pretty blunt. We can definitely see a revival in some form of a support march after the release of Philip II. Just to quickly gloss over his skills here, we've got his active skill. He can make 5 nearby allied troops take 10% less damage and deal 20% more damage. This can stack 2 times, so he can stack this active skill twice, but it is only going to last 2 seconds. That should be kept in mind. It's a really, really short duration of a buff. I mean, it's a lot of stats. You're getting a 10% all damage reduction and a 20% all damage bonus. and it can stack twice, so that can be 20% less all damage or 20% less all damage reduction and a 40% all damage bonus, but it is only 2 seconds. So do keep that in mind. It's a really short buff to be getting, and you really want it to line up well with your commander's active skills. His stats are decent. I'm not going to go over all of them, but he's got really good stats overall. He's really good for archers there with that 35% health. He's got good march speed. He's decent with 1 unit type or even 2 unit types. He's got a fairly okay amount of damage. You can deal, it's pretty bad. It's a 10% chance to deal a 800 damage factor to 3 enemy troops and reduce their rage by 100, but it is a cooldown of 3 seconds. Granted though, whenever you are going to be launching a basic attack, it's a 10% chance. So it is nice to have this at your disposal, this third skill, but it's not OP. And the fourth skill is where that double active skill is going to come in. Whenever he uses an active skill, he's going to have 40% chance to use that active skill a second time, which will allow him to double it up. And if he doesn't get it, then the second commander, which will be your secondary, will also have a chance of getting him to trigger his active skills. So let's say Philip II uses active skill, doesn't trigger the second skill, the next commander can use it, and they'll have a 20% chance of triggering it as well. So it's a 60% chance per skill cycle to trigger the active skill again, which is kind of interesting. So keep that in mind. That's kind of his kit just at a glance. And overall, I do think that there is a slight possibility this could bring some form of a leadership support march back into the game. The amount of stats that Philip II is giving definitely beats out Trajan. You're getting up to, I think it's 40% more all damage, 20% reduction. It's 60% all damage bonuses. It's kind of crazy when you do think about it. But again, the problem kind of stands with what pairing would you put with Philip? Would you go with a Shajar? Would you go with a Nevsky? Would you go with a Scipio? Would you just put him with Trajan? It's kind of something you need to consider. But if you put him with Trajan, Trajan is very old. We spoke about some things in his kit that are a little bit lacking, and something that should be noted, he's got a lot of skill damage bonuses. So this stuff could be something that puts a wedge in between Trajan and also a wedge in between the pairing of him with Philip. So I just don't really know if 100% right now. I would say that could be a full option. I do see it though as a possibility and as one of the possible marches. Another thing I think that could stop a possible leadership march in the future is, again, damage is much higher nowadays. The amount of damage that marches will be taking is astronomical compared to what it was before. Back at the release of Trajan, the higher range damage commanders, you had some commanders like Guan who had really good damage, but commanders like Nevsky, commanders like Scipio Africanus, all these commanders didn't exist. This next higher tier generation that are just loaded with stats. And they definitely were not commanders with ridiculous amounts of AoE like Zulang and like Herman, commanders like Liu Che. These commanders didn't exist as much. I mean, there were high AoE damage commanders, but they weren't at this level. And I don't think that Philip II's stats are kind of at a level for me to say where he can just take that damage, or whether or not his buffs will be worth it to the point of him taking a bad trade the majority of the time. When it came down to Trajan, he took bad trades almost always, and that was to be expected because he's going to give you ridiculous buffs. But will Philip II's buffs that only last for 2 seconds be strong enough? It's kind of the big question that I think a lot of people are asking as to whether or not he could be meta. So if Philip II's buffs are enough for him to make up for that deficit in damage, you could see him become meta. I don't see why he couldn't be meta in that situation. But if he kind of is weak in terms of the amount of buffs he's giving, it's not boosting you enough, then there is a chance that we also don't see, again, we don't see the revival of a leadership supporting march. So if we see Philip II as like a low-ish value commander, he's not giving too many stats to the point where it's worth it, we just will not see him as a proper and strong commander. Another thing that could drive a wedge into the idea of a supporting commander is engineering. Engineering are kind of the killer to leadership in a way, because engineering replaced what could have been a 5th march. It's another reason we saw Trajan fall off. Besides just running 5 DPS marches, like running 2 cavs, 2 archers, and an infantry, we have seen a rise in running an engineering march in your 6th march slot, your 7th, or even your 5th march slot. And I think, again, will this commander be worth it over the engineering marches, which trade super, super well? I'd pretty much say that they won't. This commander, probably, if you're going to do a really niche investment where you go and get a leadership commander, you go and expertise him, put him with Trajan, and run that march, I don't see him being stronger than running an engineering march. I don't know how it would be possible for him to get enough value to beat some of the most ridiculous trades, especially the stuff that I've seen with Gonzalo and some trades that I've seen with Margaret, Barber, even trades with Gajamata. They all get such insane trades in the right situations to the point where it's like, you don't even need to consider running not even infantry march, to the point you don't need to consider running a leadership support march, because you've just got this engineering march that sits in the back. It's still a supporting march to your murder wall because it's dealing so much damage so that it can take down the targets you're hitting faster, and it's got less risk. It's got way lower hospital costs because you are not going to get a bad trade on it most of the time, and it's going to function similar to a normal open field march. It kind of makes you consider, again, would these new leadership commanders be strong enough to replace the idea of an engineering commander? Me personally, I would prefer to go and get an engineering commander. The second we see the new engineering commanders, again, this could make a difference in terms of leadership. If we see 2 new engineering commanders that are really good, then Philip II will lose even more value or possible value. If we see 2 new engineering commanders that are bad, maybe we could see more leadership marches on the open field that are doing a supporting role. But engineering kind of take the cake for a good march to pick as a 5th march over a supporting march if you didn't want to get another archer, infantry, or cavalry march. Engineering, we're really good at that. Most free-to-play low spenders would probably pick up an engineering march now over getting something like a Trajan or a Philip II, just again because they are not going to be as high a value. The last key pointer I would look at when it comes down to running some form of an leadership and supporting march is the hospital costs versus the march slot itself. Right now, when it comes down to Rise of Kingdoms, it's really easy to get 5 good trading marches. There is no real reason to not get 5 good trading marches. You can run 2 archer marches, they'll be fine. You can run 2 infantry, you can run 1 cavalry, you can run 2 cavs, 2 archers, 1 infantry. You can run any combination of those 5 marches, and they're all really, really good. At the release of Trajan, leadership was a relatively okay commander thing to pick. A lot of people ran Ethelflaed in their ball, and a lot of commanders like that work. So Trajan was a really good 5th march slot, mainly especially because there wasn't a good 5 march murder ball, like really meta 5 march murder ball. But we've seen a bit of a slow in power creep in Rise of Kingdoms. A lot of older commanders are still holding their own quite a bit, especially commanders like after the release of, let's say, I want to say for archers, after the release of Boudica Prime and Henry, every single commander can hold their own pretty well. Boudica and Henry can even hold their own in the current meta. Even YSG can hold his own decently. So you don't really have a reason nowadays to go pick up a 5th leadership support march when you can kind of just run these other 5 marches. When you move in towards the 6 and 7 march territory, that's where people may start to consider a supporting march, but that's really just whales left. And I think maybe for big whale murder balls, these supporting marches could be really good and give a lot of value, but I just don't see how it would work for a lower spender or free-to-play ball. If you're a free-to-play low spender running 3 marches, I highly, highly doubt it would be worth grabbing a supporting march. Running 4 marches, again, I highly doubt it would be worth getting a supporting march. Running even 5 marches, I still think it's kind of on the fence and something I wouldn't consider. I'd rather have a Belisarius Prime and a Hauche being in my murder ball over having a march that's just going to give me stats, but take a really high hospital bill. I don't think it's going to give you enough stats to justify the higher hospital bill. I ran some very short tests running Philip and Trajan kind of in a 1v1 situation against a lot of the meta marches. Considering, let's say, it didn't even get swarmed and it was just a 1v1, the march trades abysmal. I mean, it's like ridiculously bad. Like, it dealt like 90k power loss and lost like 500,000 in a 1v1 against Hauche being with Belisarius, not even in a murder ball. It's like the worst 1v1 you could think of. It's the 2 weakest 1v1 marches you could possibly get, and it got destroyed. It was demolished. It wasn't even close. So, will it add enough stats to make it worth it? I just don't 100% think so. The only time I see this leadership march being really, really good would be in game modes like Ark of Osiris, like Champions of Olympia, and like Sunset Canyon, where tanky commanders can work really nicely. Trajan is tanky, he's still tanky in the current meta, he's still a pain to kill in the current meta, and Philip also looks really tanky in the current meta. He's got a lot of stats that are going to make him quite tanky, he's got a lot of possible damage reductions, especially if you're running 2 or more troop types, so he's got that potential for those game modes. In terms of the open field though, I just don't see him being a fully powerful and fully meta-worthy commander for the majority of players and the majority of the playstyle currently in the game. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I am quite interested to see what do you guys think of the current position of a leadership march in the future, a leadership supporting march. I know I predicted that we would see something like this. It was my top prediction, I'm pretty sure. But the question is, will it actually work? I don't think so, but I am obviously going off speculation here. Once we see Philip II release, there is a good chance that a leadership march could work, and I would say it could swing either way. But if I had to put my money on one side, I would say it's going to be similar to the release of Lapu Lapu. Very few people would consider investing in him just because he won't be strong enough. So I'm interested to see what you guys hear. Tell me in the comments down below what you guys think about Philip II and the idea of some form of a leadership supporting march. Will it work? Will it not work? Please do let me know in the comments. I'm very interested. Other than that, though, I just want to say I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.